Here's our next artist from Florence. His name is Giotto. There he is. Now this is just a photo that I took of a statue of him in Florence. This is not an accurate self-portrait or anything like that. But I like to use it to give your brain somewhere to sit with this artist. So his name is Giotto, and he is believed to be one of the students of Cimabue. And here is your next artwork. This is Virgin and Child enthroned. Yes, the Virgin Mary, the child is Jesus, and enthroned means sitting on a throne. And we see she's surrounded by angels in this space with a gold background. In fact, the shape of the altar piece, yes, is very similar to what we saw with Cimabue. That is not a problem, because what we understand is Giotto, as a student of Cimabue, would be working from the master, Cimabue, and creating based on his master's skills. If you've heard the phrase, imitation is the best form of flattery, and a lot of times people say, like, don't copy, be original, don't do other people's work, do your own. Yes, for your papers and your exams, I want you to do your own work. But in terms of artistry, and especially back here in the 14th century, what we're seeing is not a problem of plagiarism, but instead a system of learning from your master as an apprentice, as a student. What? Let me just show you the concept with a term here. The term is called apprenticeship. Now, some of you may have heard of this term before. Some of you may have even or are in apprenticeships. Apprenticeship is when someone is learning their craft from a master craftsman in their master's workshops. Now, I introduced this term here because the connection between Giotto and Cimabue is one that is very similar to what we see in a lot of apprenticeships. A typical apprenticeship for back then in the 14th century would be for a young boy who shows some kind of a interest or a talent to be put into a workshop with a master, somebody who's already mastered that craft. So let's just say for artistry. And the young men would be around maybe 13, 14 years old when they would be sent to be an apprentice for a master in a workshop. And in that workshop, there would be many other young men who would also be learning the craft in the master's workshop. Men, young men. Women out there, you don't count. Your whole job is to look pretty and have lots of babies and take care of the house. So no, you're not going to have a career, you're not going to have any talent, and you're not going to then apply that talent. No. So apprenticeship is something in our mindset for our semester-long class is something that is cultivated at a young age for young men. And you would start in your master's workshop in a very rudimentary, basic kind of skill set. I like this illustration here to help me explain an apprenticeship. So you can see, here's the master painter. And then we see this very small young man who is just assigned to sketching. He's got his charcoal and he's got his tablet and he's working that. And then you can see when they get a little older, they are assigned to more specific or detailed or delicate tasks. Like we see this young man over here, he's practicing a portrait. And then the bigger, larger, more prestigious commissions would then be handled by the master, and the younger apprentices would be doing things like the prep work. So you might be sent into the workshop to start by basically like sweeping the floors, cleaning up the crafts, cleaning up the tables. And then as you get a little older, maybe you're in charge of, working and mixing the pigments, prepping the paints, prepping the materials. And then as you get a little older, start some sketching, maybe do some of the smaller leaves or wings of the angel in these more minor paintings that your master has been hired to do. And then as you develop your skill set, maybe the master's like, I got this big painting. I'll do this figure. You do these 7 figures over here, and you do that tree over here. And so you're learning as you are practicing under a specific master. Now, how do you get out of that? Well, you present your masterpiece. Yes, the term masterpiece, it comes from you saying, this is a piece to show I have mastered this craft. And then you would go on and have your own career in your own apprenticeship studio. The reason I bring this up is because the apprentice is trained to paint like the master, from the master. And so to see a shocking similarity between an apprentice and the master and their artworks, it's not a bad thing. It's the master has trained the apprentice. Now, the idea is that the apprentice would learn from the master, take what he has learned, and then go be his own with that skill set. So, with all this in mind, when we look at Giotto and the Virgin and Child enthroned, we should see the connection with, let me just, hold on, this one here. We should see the connection or the similarities between Cimabue and Giotto. However, we shouldn't just stop there and say like, oh, they look the same, okay, right, done. Let's take another look at Giotto. Now, if we were in class together, I would ask you, we've looked at Cimabue. Tell me what is different in Giotto. So I'm going to give you some time right now. I'll move out of the way. Tell me. Think about the elements we've talked about. The gold, sense of perspective or depth. Look at the structure of the throne. The use of the shadows to give you a sense of space. Look at the bodies. Bodies of the angels. Look at the drapery. So tell me, what do you see that's similar and what do you see that's different? Okay. Yes. Hand up. Good, good. One of you, most likely, is thinking the perspective of the throne. When we looked at Cimabue, we said, oh, he's trying to give us some space, but the curve of that footstool with the arch over them, it doesn't quite make sense. Giotto is also giving us an archway. A little different, a little bit more convincing. We see some light transition into some shadow, as if it's a real space and the light is filtering and behaving like light. Good, good. Yes, another great one. A few of you noticed the footstools. So Cimabue, yeah, it goes backwards and Giotto goes forward. But also, there's a better sense of perspective in Giotto's footstool. Look at how the lines go back into these angles as if, well, it gives us that illusion of space, as if the throne is really up close and then it's receding backwards to where she sits or occupies the seat, right? Okay, what's another thing you noticed? Yeah, there's no prophets. Yeah, that's not, give me more. Look at the angels. Yeah, the halos are the same, but what's different? Cimabue's angels are stacked, one on top of the other, backwards, right? So Cimabue is trying to give us a sense of depth by having one in front of the other, or one behind, but he stacks them up. What this does is it kind of almost think of it like a ladder. It's like he's put them all stacked up on a ladder, and it makes for a fairly shallow, here, if I do it like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. But it makes for a very shallow space. Look at Giotto. Giotto gives us some angels in the front and some angels behind, but there's less stacking. And so they seem to go back farther. There's more depth in Giotto's. There's more sense of space. In fact, Cimabue stacks them so that we can see all of their beautiful little faces, right? But Giotto, to give us a better sense of space or perspective, he's not going to reveal everybody's face, because if somebody's behind somebody else, then you're not going to see them. And so their faces are obscured, or obstructed, I should say. So good, yeah. The use of space in those angels. Anything else? Let's look at the body of the Virgin Mary in Cimabue and in Giotto. Which one has a better sense of a body, of a mass under fabric? Giotto's. What do I mean by that? If you're still struggling, that's fine. Look at Cimabue. We have the indication of a knee, but it's indicated by the lines of the fabric, the drapery across her lap, which are these navy blue and gold stripes, right? It's very stylized. When we look at Giotto, we have a lap and we have the folds of the drapery, but we also have light and shadows to give us a sense of the body underneath. Here's another detail of Giotto's. You see what I mean? Look at the skin. He even captures the curve of her neck and a shadow under her face. Now, Cimabue does something like that, but it's less convincing because the rest of her body is without shadows, without light. It's all very stylized in line, whereas Giotto gives us more sense of space and depth and mass in those figures. Now, you might be thinking, Miss Cortez, that's unfair to compare these two. But look, here it is at the Uffizi. It's a common discussion because what we're seeing is the lineage from Cimabue to Giotto. And this concept of one coming after another and then adding to it or perfecting it or fixing it, this kind of discussion of teacher to student or master to apprentice is something that we're going to be seeing and we're going to be discussing throughout the rest of the semester. So I want to start us off on this first lecture with this concept. And here at the Uffizi, that's how they hung them, so that you could go, ah, Cimabue, oh, Giotto, okay. Now, Giotto's use of light and shadow to give us a sense of space or depth is your next vocabulary term. There's the term. The term is called chiaroscuro. I know, I'm throwing all these crazy Italian terms at you. We're going to see some Italian words, we're going to see some French words. It's just part of the vocabulary of our history. And that's why I give them to you within the lecture so that you can write them down and hear it. So, chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro translates from Italian to light and dark. Chiaroscuro. Light and dark, which is the modeling of highlights, midtones, and shadows, light and dark. And this chiaroscuro is what we're seeing and appreciating in Giotto. So let me read the definition. Light and dark, modeling of highlights, midtones, and shadows with a consistent light source to give the illusion of three-dimensionality. So when we see the figure of the Virgin Mary, we see a light coming down, casting these highlights, these midtones, and these darker shadows, so that we have a better sense of space, of depth, of mass under the fabric. Another element that I want to talk about, and what Giotto is highlighting here within Chiaroscuro, is the relationship between the Virgin Mary and child or baby Jesus. What he's done is he's created a more, well, let's go back to the comparison of him and Cimabue. Hold on. Okay, here we are. We see the same figures, the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus, the Virgin Mary and baby Jesus. But do you see something different or notice something about Giotto's Virgin Mary besides the chiaroscuro? He highlights her breast. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm being crass or perverted or anything like that. When we look at the Virgin Mary's body, what we're supposed to understand her here is her as a mother. And to show the breast under her shirt is to make a connection with her and her child, the nursing, the breastfeeding of her baby. So we see her as mother and child, emphasizing the humanity of her, the body of her, and showing that relationship, something that we don't, it's more abstracted in a Cimabue, isn't it? Now, I bring this up because what we see in Giotto is what many art historians refer to as the beginning of the Renaissance. In fact, if you didn't notice it before, check it out in your period style. So yes, Giotto is Italian Gothic, but many art historians also refer to him as Proto-Renaissance. Proto? What does proto mean? Proto means like just prior to, almost. So Proto-Renaissance is a term for Giotto and this larger presence of body, of humanity, and highlights, midtones, shadows, chiaroscuro, perspective, all of these elements that we were just appreciating in Giotto, we start to see them come in full force in the Renaissance. So art historians looking back at this, they were like, look at him. He's not Renaissance, but he's sure acting it. He's Proto-Renaissance. So if on an exam you want to identify Giotto as Proto-Renaissance, that's fine. You can also call him Italian Gothic because he's alive during the Gothic period in Italy. I bring this idea of the Proto-Renaissance up because it's a term. And I want you to have this in your notes as we start to look at the Renaissance next week. So Proto-Renaissance, a greater pursuit of classical antiquity and naturalistic representations. And then Renaissance is a rebirth in the interest, activity, and spirit of classical Greek and Roman art, literature, and learning. You got that down? I mean, you can pause this and write it, but let's talk about this official definition for Proto-Renaissance. Proto-Renaissance, okay, just prior to the Renaissance. Got it. A greater pursuit of classical antiquity, naturalistic representations. Miss Cortez, what do you mean classical antiquity? Classic Greek and Roman stuff. Okay. Where do we see this in Giotto? It is his approach to highlights, midtones, shadows, a more natural rather than abstract representation. Got it? Now, if you're coming into this without any knowledge of the ancient Greek or an ancient Roman world, that's totally fine. Just take my word for it. That in the ancient Greek and the ancient Roman world, there was a larger emphasis on things being very realistic, very much from the natural world. And then after the fall of the Roman Empire, we see an emphasis on the abstract world. The artwork in what we see in Giotto is a turn back to the more naturalistic that we see in Greek and Roman. So he's called Proto-Renaissance. Got it?